A huge shakeup is happening at Capcom, with Yoshinori Ono leaving the company after 30 years. What does this mean for the future of Capcom and, of course, the future of Street Fighter? The Xbox Series S has officially been confirmed in the weirdest way possible, and I think there's a lot to talk about with this situation. And finally, has Crash Bandicoot 4 been leaked for the Nintendo Switch? Many people are saying it has, but I'm not so sure about that. RGT, this video is really similar to Spawnwave's video. Oh really? Well, hot take. You know who to blame for GameCube prices going up? Him. Get him, boys, get him! What's going on, guys? I'm RGT85. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But without any further ado, let's talk about what's going on in the world of video games. So when you think of Capcom, you more than likely think of Yoshinori Ono, who has been pretty much the face of Capcom, especially Street Fighter, for at least the past decade. He was with the company for 30 plus years, and like I said, he was with the company for 30 plus years because Mr. Ono has actually confirmed via Twitter that he will be leaving Capcom this summer, thus leaving the Street Fighter franchise as well. Now, while a lot of people assimilate him with the Street Fighter franchise, he's actually done a lot of other games for Capcom throughout the years. Games like Dead Rising, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, and the Capcom Beat 'em Up collection. He was a producer on all of those games. Of course, he is well known for games like Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter 5, and Ultra Street Fighter 2, the final challengers on the Nintendo Switch, which I actually played yesterday just to play it, and I swear that game has just great balance to it. It's still so much fun, and yes, it might have been a bit overpriced when it originally released, but I still think it is a fantastic game for the Nintendo Switch library. Now, of course, being the Street Fighter executive producer means that you are pretty much working with the Street Fighter brand, and after working with the Street Fighter brand for so long and then leaving the company, a lot of people are questioning, well, what's the future of Street Fighter? Now, let's be real. Street Fighter 4 and Ultra Street Fighter 4, all of the Street Fighter 4 renditions that we got were absolutely fantastic. I thought that was one of the pinnacles of Capcom during the Street Fighter 4 era. Street Fighter 5, on the other hand, it's been a bit more controversial. Obviously, it was a PlayStation console exclusive. It launched with kind of a lack of quality as far as characters are concerned, and over the years they've sort of built up the character roster and added in new things, but I thought the initial launch of Street Fighter 5 was a bit paltry. But they did manage to correct the ship with it, and I do sort of wonder, well, what's the future of both Capcom and Street Fighter with Mr. Ono leaving the company? Obviously, a lot of people have been working with Mr. Ono, especially in the Street Fighter universe, so I feel like the younger people that were under his tutelage will probably be fine. They sort of see where the Street Fighter franchise needs to go for in the future with subsequent releases of Street Fighter 5, or even potentially Street Fighter 6, whenever that day may come. Of course, we may see some more crossover games, but it's definitely a big shock to see Mr. Ono leaving Capcom after 30 years. He worked as sound designer on a lot of games as well, games like the Onimusha series, so definitely he left his stamp on Capcom. I'm curious to see whether or not he stays within the video game industry if he goes to work for another company, but obviously this is a big shift for Capcom, and it'll be very interesting to see what the future of both Capcom and the Street Fighter franchise really has now that Mr. Ono is leaving. But let me know in the comment section down below what you think of Mr. Ono leaving Capcom after 30 plus years, because obviously this is going to cause a very big shift in Capcom. This is almost like Miyamoto leaving Nintendo levels. Like, this is a big deal, and I'll be very interested to see what the future of Capcom and Street Fighter really sort of holds within it now that he is leaving the company. Next up, of course, this holiday season, the Xbox Series X will be coming to us from Microsoft, which is the most powerful console on the market, but you don't really need to buy it because all your games will work on the Xbox One. Mixed marketing messages with that, you know, just a very weird situation in my opinion, but that's a video for another day. But when it comes to the fact of reality, the reality is that Xbox will be releasing the Xbox Series X this holiday season. Now, of course, since the Xbox Series X was announced, there have been lots of rumors about a cheaper console, much like what Sony is doing with an all-digital console and then the standard PlayStation 5. This was dubbed the Xbox Lockhart, but on this channel we were calling it the Xbox Series S. You could go back to videos from a month or two ago and see us talking about the Xbox Series S and calling it the Xbox Series S. Well, now the Xbox Series S has been confirmed, and it's been confirmed in possibly the weirdest way possible, and I have so many questions about this because it really doesn't make sense to me. Now, this is a legitimate confirmation coming to us from someone who picked up a control controller for the Xbox. And on the Xbox controller, you could clearly see there is branding for this controller for the Xbox Series X and the Xbox Series S. So even before the Series S is officially confirmed by Microsoft in some sort of press release or during a conference reveal, the controller already has the branding for it. And this is an official controller that has been confirmed by companies like The Verge. It seems like someone in the Chicago area is actually reselling these controllers on a secondary market. And yes, it has the Xbox Series X and Xbox Series S branding on them. So not only is it confirming this system before Microsoft even does, Microsoft has actually been asked about this situation and refused to comment on it, but I have a lot of questions because where did this controller come from? Now you might be saying to yourself, well, a retailer got it, and maybe this person bought it from a retailer, stole it from a retailer, who really knows? But that really doesn't make sense, because when you get in product early that has a street date, at most you get it like a week in advance. You're not getting it months in advance. Obviously, the Xbox Series X isn't coming out anytime soon. It's a holiday 2020 release for the new console. The Xbox Series S has been rumored to not even be releasing in 2020 alongside of the Xbox Series X, but in the future, potentially spring of 2021. So why would Microsoft already be putting branding for the Xbox Series S, a console that hasn't even been officially revealed, on these new controllers for Xbox? Obviously, you can use your Xbox One controller on your Xbox Series X, so this isn't really, a shock in that sort of regard, and it looks like you'll be able to use these controllers along a myriad of systems. So if a controller is specifically designed for the Xbox Series X or the Xbox Series S, this will work on your Xbox One as well. How many of these retailers actually have these controllers in stock? I guess it could just be sort of a preventative measure by Microsoft to have all of the branding on there so that they don't have to adjust it down the road, but it's a very, very strange situation. So the Xbox Series S is officially confirmed. We don't know about the price of the system. There has been rumors, of course, about the system being a lot weaker than the Xbox Series X, that it'll be just a digital only system, but now we know that it exists because of this controller coming out of Chicago, and I don't think I've ever seen anything as bizarre as this. So if you're looking forward to the Xbox Series X, well, now you know that it is an official thing. And finally, a lot of people seem to be under the impression that Crash Bandicoot 4 has officially leaked for the Nintendo Switch, but I'm not quite so sure about that, and I don't mean to rain on your parade, but we gotta keep it real here on this channel. Now, of course, the Crash Insane trilogy came out on the Nintendo Switch after it came out on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and the Nintendo Switch version of the game sold ridiculously well. It was on top of the UK sales charts for many, many weeks. This was a very popular game for Nintendo Switch owners, and it makes sense. Nintendo Switch owners like 3D platformers. They seem to do very well on the system, and platformers in general sort of go hand in hand with Nintendo. Now, Crash Bandicoot 4 is of course coming out next month for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, but there was no confirmation of a Nintendo Switch version. Now, this is something that Activision has done before with games like Crash Insane trilogy and the Spyro trilogy, where they released on other platforms, and then about a year later they ended up coming out on the Nintendo Switch. Well, now people have that same sort of mindset, and this is actually coming to us from the product listing on the website for the game. Now, in the source code, some people found some very interesting things. So on the website for Crash Bandicoot 4, there's actually a drop-down menu that you can click on to pre-order the game digitally for the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One. And in this source code of the website, there's actually a Nintendo Switch version of the game that hasn't been activated yet, because you can't click down to get a Nintendo Switch version of the game. It's just sort of hidden away in the source code. Now, like I said, this was actually sort of something that we saw with the Crash Insane trilogy and the Spyro Reignited trilogy, where this sort of thing was actually found on the website before this game was confirmed. So now a lot of people are thinking that, well, Crash Bandicoot 4 is pretty much confirmed for the Nintendo Switch, but I'm just not quite sure about that. First and foremost, I think if this game was going to be coming out on the Nintendo Switch, it would pretty much launch alongside of these other versions of the game, or at the worst case scenario, they would at least announce that the Nintendo Switch version of the game was coming, but at a later date, because I feel like Nintendo Switch owners would be interested to know about this game. Another thing is, all because it's within the Activision's source code for the website doesn't actually confirm anything. Like I said, this was the case with the Crash Insane trilogy and of course the Spyro Reignited trilogy, but there's another franchise where the source code has said Nintendo Switch version of the game, and yet there's never been a Nintendo Switch version of the game. It's also an Activision franchise, and that franchise is Call of Duty. It seems like every year Call of Duty has a Nintendo Switch listing within the source code of the website, and then of course the game never comes to the Nintendo Switch. So what does this actually mean? I almost believe believe at this point in time that it's just a simple template that they use for all of these games, and all because the Nintendo Switch is listed in the source code doesn't necessarily confirm that a Switch version of the game is coming. They just decide to not activate it because there is no Nintendo Switch version of that game. Trust me, Crash Bandicoot 4 makes perfect sense to come to the Nintendo Switch, especially when you look at the sales of the Crash Insane trilogy, but I just don't feel like this website listing within the source code is actually confirmation of anything. I think it's just a template, a generic template that Activision probably uses to list their games, and all because the Nintendo Switch is mentioned within that source code doesn't necessarily confirm it. Could we see Crash Bandicoot 4 come out on the Nintendo Switch at a later date? I definitely think so, but is this a confirmation of a leak for Crash Bandicoot 4? I don't think so. Alright, so that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to let me know in the comments section down below what you think of everything. Is Ono leaving Capcom really a big deal like I think it is? What do you think about the Xbox Series S being revealed via a controller that was bought in Chicago? And finally, Crash Bandicoot 4. Do you think it's coming to the Nintendo Switch? Is this confirming it? Or are you kind of like me and just believe it's a generic template that Activision is using for their website? And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. Make sure you guys check out that GameCube video I did yesterday. A very fun video talking about the GameCube prices and collecting, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.